Hi, you are listening to Face the Sun. My name is Gaia, and I'm your host. Welcome to a show where we discuss matters of religion, belief, and unbelief. Today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Bill LaMorey of Calvary Fellowship in West Hartford, Connecticut. I'll provide links below for more information. And now, on to the show. So I just want to ask you, Bill, about in regards to your church, that you have different series that you go through. Is that how you normally do things in your church?
Yeah, so we do series. We find that rather than just random piecemeal things, that to plan through a series, and it could be like a book of the Bible, or it could be a group of related topics, like I mentioned, the ones we were planning to do in the fall. You know, what's really interesting in the timing thing. You might call it coincidence. I might call it divine guidance. But I planned my preaching calendar kind of for the year, and early before the whole COVID thing, I had planned to teach Job starting right on Easter, which was because if you look at the book of Job, it's about wrestling with suffering. And so we planned a series called Judging God, which kind of has some cool implications when you work that through. And that's been a really amazing time for us to ask some hard questions about difficult times. And I don't know if you've seen, there's been lots of news articles coming out about how people are having a really hard time during COVID and social distancing and the impacts mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. So we have a series starting in a couple weeks called Breakthrough Beyond Bad Habits. And I wish I could take credit to say, okay, we planned that, but that's what we're doing. So we're doing that and then kind of getting into some wisdom things. So that's something that we've always enjoyed doing and teaching in a way that is topic kind of grouped so that people can connect in that way. But we're thrilled with that. And by the way, I should mention, because I mentioned the difficulty of COVID, there's a partner organization called Urban Alliance, and they network and service a lot of different churches in a lot of different ways. And they have a workshop coming up for free called Building Resiliency. And so during this time, if that's of any value to anybody, happy to pass that along. But yeah, that's part of what we do in terms of how we approach content. And I guess for me, we want to be a place where, I have no illusions that I'm like God's gift to preaching or anything like that. But we do see it as a value to, if people are going to show up, whether it's online or in person, to have something that's thoughtful, prepared, and engaging and interesting, so that they walk away with something to think about. So for me, that's important.
That's really neat. I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes with the it's called Building Resiliency.
Yeah, that's the workshop. That's not a Calvary thing. It's something
Oh,
that we
sorry.
are endorsing. That's the Urban Alliance one, and I would
Okay.
recommend it. If you were to go onto Urban Alliance website, you can find a link, and it's a free thing to sign up for.
And what's your next
Our
on
next
addiction,
series.
mental health?
Oh yeah, it's called Breakthrough Beyond
Breakthrough.
Bad Habits, and it's going to be a 4-part series. And here's the thing I would say: it's actually like, if you say, okay, well, I don't believe that, but will this still be something that's helpful to me?
Right.
Absolutely. You could take the principles from this and apply it to your life. Now, we're going to
Yeah.
talk about faith and God and all of that inside of there, but it's still one of those things that's helpful. And, I'll just say, my story, my background of addiction and overcoming that. And I'll probably weave parts of my story into there and share part of my experience. So I guess I just want to say that, to say, when I address these things, it's not from a place above anybody. It's like a fellow struggler, like, hey, here's what I've learned about these things. Here's how God gave me victory in these areas. But here's some practical things too, that along the way, that choices that any person would have to make. Just like, whether it be like, give away the first one, raw level honesty in anybody. I don't care if you're a Christian, you're atheist, or whatever the case. Like, if you're going to have change in a major area in your life, you got to be real honest that you have a problem, whatever your problem is. And it starts by looking in the mirror, because most of us aren't honest with ourselves about many areas of our lives. So just this idea of what does it take to break through and get beyond bad habits. First thing is a brutal self-awareness. But how do you get to that place? And what does that look like? So again, I'm excited about it, not just because it's theory, but this is part of my reality. And having come out the other side, and let's be honest, over time, you build new bad habits that you got to break through. And again, it
Right.
doesn't matter whoever you are, even if you're a pretty decent person all around. I mean, I think there's things in all of our lives we say, man, I wish I could just stop doing this or do this less or do this more, whether it's undoing unhealthy habits or implementing healthy or good habits. So yeah, that's what's on tap next for us at Calvary.
That's great. And when you're saying that you'll that anybody can take away, I do find that a lot of times too. When somebody will do a series and it'll be something like mental health or something of any something that would grab anybody's attention, and on marriage or divorce or this or that, it'll be so you got to be a Christian, and if you're not walking away with a pebble of information. And then I know there's other people like yourself who you can go, oh, that is really interesting. Or I didn't know that. You don't have to be again, I think Andy Stanley. And when I went to a few other churches in my 52, I walked away saying that was interesting, and that's something I can appreciate. So I love that it's not all like you have to be this way, and then you can pray away the addiction or whatever. That you can say things that will help everyone.
Oh yeah, and my belief is that a strong faith in God will help you immensely in this area. And yet, I've known atheists, agnostics who have overcome, and it brings them better health in a lot of areas of their life too. So yeah, it'll certainly be something that everyone can connect to.
So one of the things that I was wondering, Bill, is why would somebody choose to go to Calvary? What's kind of setting where is your direction, and where are you focused and set apart, and why would people choose to go to Calvary?
That's a great question because obviously with church you can go anywhere, and I'm going to speak. I'm going to pretend COVID isn't here for a minute, because online, I mean, honestly, you can dial in, and it's hard to compete with if you just look at music and message from national mega churches and so forth, and production values. So putting that aside, let's say we're back in our regular environment. I can only tell you the things that I hear from people again and again. Number
Mhm.
one is people love the diversity. Like when you
Yeah.
walk in, I have a neighbor who's a police officer, and he's scheduled for security sometimes, and comes in there and he says, I got to tell you, I've never been in an environment in this area and seen a more diverse crowd than comes on a Sunday morning. And we love that. We value that. That is one of our core values, is sort of unity and diversity, that we have people from many different countries, many different ethnicities, not just ethnic diversity, but age diversity, um, lots of different ways, who come in and look around and say, "Oh, there's someone like me here." And we have people of very different political views as well. And I think that I can get into maybe that in a moment if we want to, about how to create an environment like that. But by having people, maybe the only thing we agree about is Jesus. But isn't that enough for us to gather together and build a relationship? And we could disagree about certain things. So I think that's one of the things I hear. Another thing I hear about Calvary is the warmness and the friendliness. That, hey, when you come in, we're going to be super intentional about welcoming you without weirding you out, and hanging out afterwards, if you're up to it, to grab a cup of coffee, grab a bagel, muffin, whatever. That there are people that will sit and talk to you. So I hear that, and then the truth is, you connect sometimes with certain music and messages. Like we're not going to reach everyone. Rick Warren, author of The Purpose Driven Life, has always said it takes all different kinds of churches to reach all different kinds of people. And by that, just people have different preferences. So if you love organ music, like you live for it, we're not going to really be what you're looking for, because it's a more contemporary worship thing, and that's just not going to be your deal. For me, it's like, okay, if you're looking for a person with five demons, and that's the most lofty, eloquent person around, I'm not maybe going to be the guy that you're going to want to hear preaching to. I have biblical training, but I also have street cred training, and and I have a weird sense of humor that comes out sometimes, and I stumble over my words. So for some people, it's like, oh, I can connect to that. Some
Comforting.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh wow, man, if God can work in his life, he can do anything. But for
You can
other
do
people,
anything.
yeah, seriously, I'm not hopeless. But for other people, they might look at something, a different experience. But I think those are some of the things that, and I don't believe everybody, I just, people connect in certain environments and don't. But what we want to do is lower every barrier that we possibly can so that people come in and check it out and not feel weirded out and actually feel welcome. And we're glad that you showed up.
Gotcha.
Because like you said, whether it's Luke, poor Luke, or you, I recognize, and we recognize that it takes a lot, because, just show up. It actually takes a lot mentally to get you in the car, to get you in a building and step into a strange environment where you really don't know what's going to happen. And I think as church people, we can sometimes forget that because we get comfortable, familiar. We know the deal. We know how to work our way around. That's why I love when I visit a church I've never been to. I'm pretty familiar with churches, but when I walk in a new environment, like you were saying earlier, I don't know where the bathrooms are. I don't know how they do things in their culture in this particular place. So it puts you at a less comfortable spot, which is a value, by the way, of church folks visiting other churches and checking that out. So those, I guess, would be a few of our things. And, one other thing that people really say is that they like that we are trying to figure out how do we serve our community and reach out, whether it be our community outreach day where we cancel a service once per year and go out and do community service projects throughout the community. And funnily enough, though, the week before we were quarantined was a community outreach day. So we had one less week there too. But we enjoy engaging in the community and serving the community in various ways. And I think that is important to us if we're going to proclaim the message of Jesus. His message wasn't just verbal, it's word and deed. So how do you go out and do things and serve people and figure that out? And that's certainly more challenging right now than it is normally, but we're still trying to figure that out too.
Yeah, it is helpful if somebody notices how stressful it is. And it's understandable that if this is what you do all the time, that you're not feeling any stress, and it's hard to empathize with the stress level. So yeah, I just appreciate when people have some level of empathy on the stress level. That there have been times, you're right, when you just get up to make the decision. I postponed so many Sunday mornings where I'm like, I'll go, and then no, I won't. And when I drive over, when I get closer to any place of worship and I start pulling into the parking lot, I feel like I'm going to go to a cardiac arrest. There's one place that's a wonderful place that I went to. They had a visitor's parking spot. I'd gone there earlier, a week or two prior, and spoke with the pastor, and I saw they had visitors parking spots. And I was like, oh, don't park there, because I got nervous that if I parked there, it would be shing. People maybe they watch who parks there, and then they come up to you and start talking to you and overly want to be besties. And then I thought how nice it was, though, that was an option. It's not like you had to park there, so that somebody else, I watched, actually it was one of these kind of church shopper people, because somebody said, oh, you're like a church shopper. I'm like, what the heck is that? And then I went on to YouTube and came across people who did it, and they were Christians. They weren't in the different mentalities. So they had a very strict checklist of what they were looking for, as opposed to just people being people. They were looking for different things. But he loved that there's a visitor's parking spot. And when he got out, he was talked to, he's walked, into the church with somebody who introduced him to somebody where that would totally have freaked me out. Right. So it's nice that they have the option for somebody who wants the red carpet rolled out. And then for me, that I get to see that you're doing that, but I get to park anywhere else. It's so interesting, the stress levels that you feel.
I can imagine.
So yeah. So I remember first time I went to you when you're meeting somewhere else, and I walked in and I could feel the color was not in my face. I could feel it. And you looked over at me and I just looked like a deer in the headlights. Hi. I thought I was going to break into a rash. And, several people that we had known who had visited you and said, you got to go, you got to at least support him.
Right.
And off I went, but I was like...
Which I appreciate you pushing past the uncomfortable and entering in anyway. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks. So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, one of the things I talked to you about and touched on approach was if you had some thoughts and ideas that you'd like to see on this show, Face the Sun. And also if anybody who's listening who knows you and they get in touch with you via your website, or they happen to know you, that they can let you know what some ideas that you have, and you're, can certainly be willing to share them with me. Are there any thoughts that you're thinking of that you'd like to see?
Yes, I thought about that. First of all, I do love, again, your intention for 2020 and doing that. And so looking forward to seeing more of that, but understanding where you are right now and forced to be creative. And I think a lot of good will come from that, because you'll whether it's this Christianese or kind of looking at some funny things there, I think that'll be good. But I think a couple things that would be interesting, because one of the things that you're saying is in your goals is not simply to critique. You're not trying to be like a podcast Yelp of churches. From It's more of
Yeah.
oh, that'd be interesting. It's more of like, hey, I'm exploring, I'm seeing this. And my shadow mission, so to speak, is how do I find community, even if I don't believe along the same lines as a lot of these places that I'm going to visit. So I think for me, and one of the things that we would value at our church and that I would think would be good is how do we find, because we know we could do like, debates and things like that, but does it always have to be around something that we disagree about? In other words, what can we find that we agree about, and how do we partner together? And I think there's lots of healthy ways to do that. Now, I get it. Everything is so politically charged these days, so it's hard to even do a good thing to serve our community without some barriers in place. So I look at it and say, okay, you remember that song Breakfast at Tiffany's? Hey, that's the one thing they had in common, is they both like that old movie or whatever. So okay, what's the Breakfast at Tiffany's, that we have together as maybe a group of people that believe and don't believe? And is there a cause that we could work on, and finding out what some of those things, because if you work shoulder to shoulder with someone for a common purpose, even if you disagree with them, it's harder to hate them, it's harder to be mad at them, it's harder to believe caricatures of them. And so, for example, one of the things that I've always seen is human trafficking. We work with an organization, Love 146. It's international, but it's based in New Haven, Connecticut. They do great stuff. We've had their president speak at Calvary several times. They're part of our monthly support that we send out to help end that. And, I've had Christians and non-Christians disagree about a lot of different things, even good causes, but I haven't had anyone say, oh, well, that's not a worthy cause that we can't get behind, to liberate people from that and to create awareness to prevent them from being in there and to do aftercare for people coming out of there. So it's like, I give that as just an example. And there's more than that, but that's like the easy one to say, okay, if you don't agree that we should work to somehow end and combat that, then there's other problems in your life. Again, no matter what you believe in terms of spirituality or faith, it's just more like a human issue. So I look and say, what are some things, and maybe I kind of gave you one, but what are other things that we could work on? Because, for us as a church, we realize that we don't have to create everything on our own. We like to partner with organizations, sometimes faith-based, sometimes secular organizations, to say, how can we send volunteers and or funds to help partner together? Because this is a good thing. This is something that follower of Jesus should believe and should be about. And how do we do that? So I think exploring those things that we can collaborate on is a good way. And I guess one of the barriers that I'd say is, I think I'm a big fan of rock music.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I went to a concert at Gillette Stadium, and it was awesome. And the singer got up and said, "All right, how many of you like our music?" And everyone's like going nuts. And he said, "All right, and how many are glad you're here?" And everyone's going crazy. And then he just said something like this. He's like, "All right, I don't care if you eat meat, you don't eat meat. I don't care if you vote left, right. Basically, I don't care what you believe about faith in that. We're here today. We're going to have a good time. Let's do that together." And it was kind of like, as silly as that sounds, and like, okay, trite as it sounds, it's actually bold in this environment, because every person, left, right, whatever, is pressured by their groups to use whatever platform they have for political purposes. This is sort of getting on a side tribe, but I feel like, can we have some environments that are depoliticized? And by the way, my strong conviction, I know some churches disagree with me, is from the very beginning, we've made Calvary a place where we're an apolitical church. We don't rally, we don't do this, we don't, and I think that's why we see people from all spectrums of the political persuasion that are connected to each other, usually through faith in Jesus, that we're able to move together. But even for people that don't believe, can we have environments? And one of the things, Maureen Dowd, New York Times columnist, a few years ago, had something that I completely resonated with. And I know you're in politics, and I know it's important to you. It's important to me. It should be important to everyone to have some political belief and framing structure. But what she said is, yeah, believe, vote, do all that, but your identity is more than your political beliefs. And she just went on
Right.
and on, and she just went saying, like, we need to have something deeper than our political beliefs. And that's not to say that politicians or politics aren't important. I guess my belief is, can we create some spaces, kind of like that concert I mentioned, where we can put that aside, knowing that that's going to be a third rail for a lot of people, and just get us into shouting at each other, and find a way to put that aside and find those common areas. And I don't mean to sound Pollyannish and all that, but I think it's possible if we're willing to put that aside for a little bit. It just takes some intention, not changing who you are, but maybe recognizing that's not only who I am, and what can I do beyond that. So I'm sorry, you asked me what time it is. I told you how to build a watch. That's what happens when you get a preacher on the podcast.
I do like that you can talk. It's wonderful. I don't have to pull things out, which is fantastic. And I like what you're saying. And what I would love to say is that for people to email, for those who are online listening to Face the Sun, that if you would email Bill, those who know you, and to reach out to you on ideas that you would think that would be helpful for Face the Sun. What's the church email address or your email address? How would they best email you to give you ideas of what they think should be on Face the Sun and what they think about the ideas that you just stated, actually?
Sure. You can email me directly, bill@calvaryhartford.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to talk to anyone.
Okay. And then I will sign off here. And what I will say is, anybody who has any other ideas, I've gotten a few people to email me some thoughts, and I'd like to get them coming in. So you can email me at facethesun2020@gmail.com. I want to thank everyone who's listening to this episode. My name is Gaia, and this is Bill LaMorey. And I want to thank you so much, Bill, for being on and sharing so many great ideas and your perceptions and where you're going and what you're thinking, and especially pulling in atheists to come on board with you. It's been really great to be a part of that.
Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to what's next on Face the Sun.